Hello, everybody. Welcome back to NB Poli Pod. My name's Joanna Killen. I'm here from the unceded territory of the Wolastoqey, Pescataway, and Mi'kmaq peoples in Metaquist, also known as St. John. We take no days off, so we are here to bring you another week of political banter from myself and my lovely co-host, Brent Harris.
Yeah, folks, before warned, all of you NB Polypod listeners, this week we are running on fumes. I've been in the shop all week teaching new people how to swing hammers. So hopefully we can get new people swinging hammers at homes we need. And also working on a wheelchair ramp for somebody that took on as a feel good, do good project that I didn't have time for. And you've been teaching at NBCC, and we've had like 4 other things going on just today alone. So it's like 7:30 at night on Wednesday, and we are just getting home from work, and we have to get this pod out because we have to leave the house. We both have to be at work tomorrow early on. Like, yeah.
Bright and early. I haven't had like a 9 to 5 in a long time. I've been one of those sort of more gig type people, but I'm really grateful for the job I have teaching people some workplace essential skills. And with the awesome group of women who are all going to be working in our daycare system. So couldn't be happier.
Yeah, also a huge need. Also, there's no daycare spots available for anybody. So that's the context you, the listener, find yourselves in. This is the water in which you shall swim for the political banter this week. This is the discipline of conversation that we want to practice and embody. And this week, and this was your idea, but we were talking about it.
Yeah,
is we had a listener say to us, "Well, you need to get a conservative on there. Like, you really just need to get a conservative." And so we're just like, okay. So for the last 2 weeks, we've been trying. We've been messaging conservatives that we know, saying, "Will you please come on?" Been trying to get at like even liberals that we know. We're like, "Would you come on and chat about the state of things and where we want to go?" We've been trying to get a whole like.
I guess we're like very scary people.
Yeah, what is it? I don't understand, but we can't get them. So this is going out to all of you conservatives out there. We need to know what the heck you guys want to do.
Yeah.
All I know right now is that your federal version, your federal cousins, for the progressive conservatives in New Brunswick versus the federal conservatives, all I know you want to do is just get rid of the carbon tax and Justin Trudeau. That's it. And so when it comes to like this election cycle, like, is there any conservatives out there who are willing to speak on their behalf, even? Like, even if you're not a part of,
we'll take some trolls. We'll take some people who don't agree. Would love to have some folks on who disagree with us, honestly, because it is feeling like a bit of a bubble, and we'd love to chat and have a discourse where we can all, agree to disagree, even, which is totally fine.
Yep.
And get it off Facebook.
Yeah. And I know, like, listen, I realize that you might call us a left-leaning pod. I still to this day disagree, because if we had some very left-leaning people on here on some issues, I guarantee you I'm going to be the first to disagree on some things. But that's fine. We can't knock us for not trying. There are conservative things in which I do believe. I do believe that you shouldn't tear down a wall until you know why it was built. And that kind of principle for me pours into many different areas. Now, there are all kinds of conservative walls in policy form and legislation form, program form, whatever, in our province and our governments that I know why they were built, and I want to tear them down. But there's all kinds that, I don't necessarily know about. So I think for us, we want to be able to dive into that conversation. I mean, let's face it. Right now, we have a federal conservative party that can just coast to victory because everybody's frustrated with Justin Trudeau. And the NDP are not necessarily demonstrating themselves to be the party of the lunch bucket and the workers like they used to. There's a sense that they've gotten caught up in the more virtue signally more identity politics stuff of the urban centers, especially the big urban centers. Whether that's true or not, I'm not saying. I just think that that is a sense I've heard other commentators comment on. And here in New Brunswick, right, like all we're seeing now from the PCs is this idea of fiscal restraint. So what did we see today was the Premier Higgs, call the federal budget alarming. What are your thoughts on that, Joe?
Well, it's like, again, like why we want to talk to conservatives. It's what do you want to do then? Like, what's your plan? Where are you coming from? Because I get that being in opposition is, an easy, low energy way to go about it. But what would your ideal budget look like, Premier? Like, how would you make sure that people are being housed and that people are being taken care of? And that's where
Well,
I'm
I
interested
mean, we just saw
to
his
know.
budget. Yeah, and we just saw his
Yeah.
budget, and
Yeah.
there's nothing in there for them really. Like there's money being spent on things, but no different direction that seems to be being pursued, and certainly no strategic realignment. There's just kind of it's kind of a tone deaf budget, right? It's basically taking the status quo and saying we're going to keep doing the status quo, and hopefully we'll do it a little better with a little bit more money in these areas. Versus what we're seeing from the federal Liberals right now, which is, pretty massive rearranging of the chairs. First time in a very long time, we're seeing a higher income tax bracket gone after. The biggest housing budget we've seen since, per capita, since the 90s. There's and a very different approach, the
Yeah.
Renters Bill of Rights, and we are going to have, so just for everybody tuning in this week, next week we are going to have a former guest that we had on the pod last year. We don't know his real name. He's a stats guy. Excuse me. We don't even know what his real job is. I don't think we know what his real job is. Do you?
He's very interested in housing data and
Millennial Moron is his name.
Yeah, he's a great prolific TikToker, Instagrammer, social media poster, content creator, and brings us a lot of those hard facts about where we're at and what the Canadian housing market is currently indicating about different things. So it'll be interesting to talk to him a bit more about this, where we're at. Honestly, I think it must be 6 months by now since he's been on here.
Yeah, I think it's more than that actually. Yep.
Yeah, what's changed, what hasn't, all that
was
kind
August.
of good stuff.
Yep.
Yeah. So it'd be great to have him back, get a sense of what he thinks of this federal budget as well, because $6 billion is a lot. And there's this fight going on between premiers and the federal government where, we listened to Danielle Smith this week talk about how she finds it alarming herself that the feds want to circumvent the provinces to go right down to the municipalities and empower them to make some big decisions around housing. And we heard both her and Sean Fraser sort of duking it out in separate interviews about the philosophy behind that.
Yeah. And I think for us, like we're looking at, we're going to have to really do some comparison and some cross analysis. I know we heard one of the takeaway statements from that interview with Millennial Moron last time was somebody's going to have their heart broken.
Yeah.
And it doesn't look at that time, it didn't look like it was going to be boomers. Sorry to throw you all into the same brush here, people who were born in the 50s and 60s. But that boomer generation has by far, benefited the most. People will say that's ageist. I don't really care. The stats are pretty indisputable at this point in time. People who were born in that era likely own their own home, more likely to own their own home than any other generation currently living, more likely to have a profound amount of equity tied up in that home available to them should they want it.
And purchasing power.
They're more likely than any other generation to have participated in the house flipping mess. You know what I realized about the house flipping thing?
No.
Like 6 years ago, everybody watched all these flip shows on HGTV, right?
Oh, yes. Me included.
We're basically, what we were doing there was basically watching piranhas tear apart a helpless animal. Like, we didn't know it. We didn't like we it wasn't that, but like if you look at what the damage was done by house flipping, and now you see so many experts saying that that is, that has led us to this problem. These, passive income bros and the buy, renovate, refinance, repeat people, all these loopholes in our housing system that allow people to cash in
Yeah.
pretty substantial ways. Those were television shows about it.
Well, what were
And
you saying? You were talking about a group here. We won't name names, but a company that had a whole bunch of buildings that would have been long paid off, and then a new group comes along and purchases them from them. And
yep.
the people who win in that scenario are the banks, because the previous owners, the debt was long paid, and now there's new debt. And I don't know why such a simple statement really like blew my mind, but it really
Yeah.
is in the bank's interest to have people have property change hands. The
So,
more,
and
the
this is,
better.
yeah, and this is another thing I'd love to have a conversation with somebody who's smarter than I am about it, or who has a very different opinion and can articulate it.
Yeah.
That I think we would love to have on the show too, because the housing policies that the federal government are rolling out are starting to. They're not saying they want to reduce the price of homes. Like, I just heard Minister Sean Fraser talk about this on Front Burner, and she asked him, Jamie Poisson asked him very clearly, do you want, or do you think home prices are going to have to decrease in, and does this plan help us do that in order to get a handle on this crisis? Because when we talk to Millennial Moron, who we will revisit all this, we're queuing up Millennial Moron here right now a lot, but when we talked to them, that was one of the statements that we said last time. It's like, there's just no way, their way forward. Either home prices have to drop and boomers have to have their heart broken about how much money they're going to have for retirement in their equity in order for millennials to be housed affordably, and Gen Z, or Gen Z and millennials are going to have to continue to suffer and become more likely to be homeless and more likely to be unhoused and unstable, like, all that. So, like, I was in a coffee shop, and I was talking to somebody about this initiative that I'm doing down here in St. John called Vacant to Vibrant. And really, it's just a few of us that have gotten together, some pretty capable people though, like architect type, business development officer type, myself, builder, Red Seal carpenter. Anyway, a bunch of us got together, created this initiative, Vacant to Vibrant. And, I was telling this person said to me, you know what? I'm the most center left person in my income bracket that you'll ever meet. And I said, wow, like, that's a pretty profound thing to say. I mean, first of all, center left, it's like, what does that mean? But anyway, like, his perspective was, there is no solving this problem without the private market, and the private market has a substantial role to play. He was talking about all the social value he's trying to create in the work he does, and certainly he does not do some of the more oppressive tactics for financializing housing. But, I said to him, look, like, there really is no way forward with that perspective, because at the end of the day, the only way is a unitary housing market where the nonprofit sector and the cooperative sector and the municipal housing sector, whoever, owns, much larger share, like 40-50% of all units. And he said he didn't believe that. And I said, but it's pretty basic math. And this is where, back to your point, and I think this is probably where we'll leave it for today on some housing a little bit, and pick this up with Millennial Moron next week. But like I said, the math is really simple. St. John had a perfect example. Hazen Group had hundreds of units across a dozen bigger buildings. And the family just decided they didn't want to own that anymore. They didn't want to run that company any longer. So they put it to market. Now, all of these buildings were basically sitting on the books rent free. I mean, not rent free, property taxes, of course, but mortgage free.
Mortgage free.
Many of them had either were near the end of their mortgage or had no mortgage on them at all any longer. and so they just owed property taxes. So the rents in these were pretty low.
Mm-hmm.
And the new owners came in and said, we are not going to raise rents. And of course, everybody kind of rolled their eyes and said, that's not possible. It's unlikely, because at that time, rents were being raised like crazy in city.
Yeah.
And still are, one of the fastest rent growth numbers in the country are in St. John. And anyway, like, what happens in that sale is buildings that are sitting mortgage free now have mortgages on them at
Mm-hmm.
higher interest rates. So there's no pathway to affordability there. But what did happen is the banks just created millions of dollars of new money. Banks don't, like, money is only created when loans happen. That's how
Yeah.
banks create money. And of course, there's a lot of regulation there, but they don't have gold bars in their basement that they're putting in a friggin' wheelbarrow, bringing up to the person who wants to buy these buildings so they can
No.
wheel them down the street to pay the dude. That's not how this
Like
works.
I said, like, the more property that exchanges hands, the better the banks do.
That's
So
right.
all of this, like, interest stuff to try and suppress this or that, it really is just making banks more money. Like, it's not affecting things except in a negative way where a lot
Yep.
less is getting built. So yeah, that's why we need to have a conservative in the room to tell us why.
Yeah, please
Yeah.
explain to me how we're gonna do more of that and solve
Yeah.
the problem. Like, I just don't see it. And yeah. So we'll pick that up. Maybe Millennial Warren will have we'll be able to play devil's advocate, right?
Exactly. But for now,
Yeah.
we'll put a pin in it.
Yeah, I'll put a pin in it for now. So yeah, back to the Blaine Higgs statement. I think it's worth, we can wrap it up there. His comment on the federal budget. I do think we'll take a quick break here in a minute, but I do think we are starting to see a pretty big front open, like a war open, if you will, at the front of a war between the provinces in many cases and the federal government.
Absolutely. There's an ideological war that's about to be unleashed, I feel. And it's just with guys like Steve Outhouse getting into the conversation and some of these other national players inserting themselves into the provincial elections coming up. Like, you're just going to see more and more of it. We've seen some more nasty anti-Susan Holt ads in my feed this weekend, sponsored by the PC party. So
yeah, they're going to go after that. So, I mean, this is what Scott Reed, this is what Corey Tonight from Curse Politics, remember last week's podcast when we were talking about some of this. That's what he said that Steve Outhouse does well, is he wedges well. He finds those issues and wedges. Really what it is trope. It's a trope, right? It's a straw man version of Susan Holt. It's a very simplistic, overly simplistic, reduced version of something she said. And it's them saying, here's why you can't vote for her.
Yeah. So they're back to the don't delete parents one with this latest one.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's, and just like really close up, like very American style. It's something else to see.
Susan Holt believes in taking away your guns. That's what we're going to
do. Oh my gosh. Well, let us take a quick break here. We'll be back with some more political fodder after this.
Yeah, let's pick it up in just 20 seconds.
Hey everyone, we're back again. And we had a thought that if we can't convince any conservatives to come on the show yet, why not go to a conservative source and have a little story time? Read you a little something about what the conservatives are thinking about this brand new Liberal budget. So in the lilting voice of Brent Harris.
Oh yeah, here we go. So
story time voice.
I'm the one with the subscription to the Globe and Mail because that's how cool I am. So let's talk about it. So Andrew Coyne is going to be our feature. Here's his article: in the Globe and Mail. A government with no priorities, no anchors, and when it comes to growth, no clue. So this is Andrew Coyne. He's a conservative columnist. He has been in the game for decades. Like I want to say Andrew's been writing and a pretty main feature for at least 25 years, but I'm not 100% sure. I just know that I've been hearing Andrew and reading Andrew since I was a bachelor's student at Mount Allison. So it's been a while. All right. So there's the article if you want to go look it up in the Globe and Mail, and let's jump into it. See what he says. The Canadian economy boasts the Trudeau government's latest budget is doing better than expected. Who expected it to do? How much worse is left unsaid. But as the budget notes defiantly, our economy is growing. Why in fourth quarter 2023, real GDP grew by, wait for it, 1% on an annualized basis, barely moving, but better than expected. It remains unclear whether the government is unaware of how badly Canada's economy has actually been performing, or whether it just doesn't care, or whether it does not know what to do about it. Possibly it is a little of all three. But faced with what is now generally conceded to be a growth crisis, an economy that is, in per capita terms, has been shrinking for several quarters, stagnating for several years, and losing ground to other developed economies for several decades. The government's produced yet another budget with no serious proposals to address it. Certainly, there is plenty in the budget's 430 pages addressed to everything else. As with its previous budgets or fall economic statements, the government has seized the opportunity afforded by the passage of a few months to add tens of billions annually to spending, even as it continues to pretend that spending is under control. The trick, as I've tried to show on previous occasions, is to issue a series of multi-year projections in which spending always slopes ever so slightly up, hoping no one will notice when the whole curve is periodically and violently wrenched skyward. The chart accompanying this column shows the results. Spending over the next several years is now projected to average $16 billion annually, more than the track laid out in Budget 23, and nearly $40 billion a year more than in Budget 22. Or let's go all the way back to Budget 2019. Had that document projected spending for fiscal 24 not at 369 billion, but at its latest estimate of 458 billion, an annual growth rate of 7.3% versus 2.7% forecast. It might have run into some considerable opposition, but as it is, it barely registers. Let's stop there.
Okay.
Just for now, and maybe I can grab something at the end of it. But I just like this obsession with understanding like what is growth and how spending occurs, and like I have to wonder, would we like this is bean counting, right? This is bean counting at its best. And like who out there is making the case publicly? Like I understand what Andrew is saying here. Essential argument is we don't have the growth to support this type of spending. This is irresponsible. Get your ass in gear, government, and care about the economy and growth, or else we're all going to die. Right? That's the point. So what is your response to somebody who would make that point?
Well, I think that it's a classic conservative approach to how society should be set up. It's, commerce, businesses doing well equals, growth and prosperity for all. Yet we're seeing businesses do extremely well, record-breaking profits in a number of industries. So I don't know. I find this is like it's like double speak again, because there's an incredible wealth being generated, but it isn't trickling down to the rest of society in order to make sure that there is enough to kind of go around. And I definitely think that they're not going to be excited about this federal budget with the sheer amount of taxation that is going to be, put upon those in upper income brackets. So to go back and look at those GDP numbers and productivity numbers and things like that, it's a deflection again away from the sheer fact that there is a ton of wealth being generated. It's just not amongst the many. It's amongst the few.
I think there's a real divergence here that I don't know how to talk to conservatives about. Um, because like on the one hand, he's right. The economy has been stagnant. It's been
But
demonstrated.
really?
Yeah. Like growth is low. It's like 1.5%, 1%.
But talk to me about like growth of what?
So GDP per capita.
Okay.
Right. And
So
so
new.
one of the points that another conservative economist, I can't remember who it is, and Andrew picks up on this, but one of the points they make is that compared to other G7 countries, right, like that we would compare ourselves to normally, we have some of the lowest rate of capital replacement. So our workers, people who are working in the economy, have access to less sort of intense capital to do work efficiently and effectively than any other of the G7, and we replace that capital even at a rate that doesn't keep up with depreciation. So let's get out of the stupid talk. That's what I call jargon talk, and I'm echoing back. What it means is, let's simplify it. If Canada was a job site, right, and you had a truck full of tools, half those tools right now were made in the 80s. We've never replaced them. And the poor boys and girls coming to work on my job site are using 1980s tools instead of the best. And places like the US and Norway and these other G7s and France and Germany and Japan, and they're all using the cat's ass, right? Like they're all using the newest stuff. So they make things faster. They make more things faster than we do. Therefore, their GDP per capita is higher.
But that's because we've made terrible choices about the industries that we want to invest in this country.
Say more.
So we don't want to invest in the widget, the tool company, the thing that's going to actually empower more productivity. We're just doing all these bare minimum, skim as much as we can from the bottom line business approaches. So the whole business economic culture in this country is focusing on, like we've said a million times on this podcast, housing as our number one GDP earner. So when we only have so much housing stock, we only have so many times we can sell the same thing over and over, and we're not willing to put our energy into actually creating new things. And we may be able to finally answer one of our patrons' questions about super clusters. Like, what if we did choose certain industries in the Maritimes, for instance, in New Brunswick, what would they be to focus in on? Because are we just lazy? We're also sitting on a ton of resources in our immigrant population, our newcomer populations of people who have very excellent educations, who are driving taxis and doing menial jobs that, a lot of the native sort of white Canadians don't want to do. So
I know you hate it, but like, are you really gonna start accepting, med degrees from the Caribbean from some fake college that just issues?
That's not a thing. A human body is a human body. You think these countries aren't treating people well when it comes to their medical care?
I can tell you there's fake universities that don't exist that issue diplomas.
Yeah, but I don't think that that's a widespread issue. I think that we have enough connectivity in this day and age to figure out if someone has a fake degree from a fake place. So we don't even
have electronic record keeping for our health industry. So we definitely have the ability. So this, I think, is the point right here, and this maybe is what Andrew and others get at. And I haven't bought in. I'm playing devil's advocate, by the way, but our healthcare industry doesn't even have digital record keeping across the board, right? And so you're right. It is for you and I sitting down at a laptop. We are quite capable of doing some cross-tab research to figure out whether the University of Delaware exists or in an African country, right? And we're able to, like, on a one-off basis, go over and probably figure out, that doesn't seem real. It doesn't look good. No, there's not.
Well, they say, like, give true crime cases to wine moms because they are excellent investigators. So I
Cool.
would say.
I maybe it's a strange world, but but the problem we have in our hospital system is we don't even have a laptop for people, right? Like the digital
Mm,
records don't even exist on the person's laptop. The laptop is there to send an email, to make sure that an order is done. It's not there. They can't click on some sort of nice CRM and bring my file up and see that I had my immunization when I was 9 years old. Like that doesn't exist. And
no.
so like the level of capital investment and intensity in our industries keeps our GDP per capita low. But you know what it does, and this is going to sound conspiratorial, it allows for the monopolization of industries. And
Hmm.
we here in Canada are probably potentially, and somebody yell at me online if you know of like how of this being an egregious example. We may be one of the worst countries per capita in monopolization of crucial industries, right?
Like
Like,
the most like necessities.
yeah,
Yeah.
and of like our like groundbreaking industries, like down in the States, like the industries of the future are the information tech companies, which that drives
Mhm.
me crazy that those industries are
Oh yeah, I
somehow.
saw a guy freaking out today about America because they're looking at building a rail system on the moon. And they just awarded this huge contract to this like defense company that is going to build a train on the moon. They're
Oh
like, we
yeah,
can't even
cool.
get a train here in like Delaware or
Yep,
Illinois or whatever. It's just wild.
yep, cool use of resources, guys. But I guess I see what they're getting at, but I think the fault is
Mhm.
not Canadian workers. And this budget is a budget that is speaking to me and you. It's
Mhm.
speaking to millennials. It's speaking to Gen Z. It's telling them this budget is saying we take the housing industry or crisis seriously. And here is 7 policies and billions more dollars than's ever been spent on it. You know, it's saying things like we take seriously the fact that people aren't contributing fairly who make a lot of money. And that is a big thing that people our age have picked up on, right?
Sure have. Even my son was talking to my dad the other day about this place here in St. John, Brunswick Square that's empty. And when he was little, I used to work for them, and the mall was full of people, full of vendors. Like there was all kinds of different stores in there. And so he remembers that, and he told my father, this is a 12-year-old boy, that it's Jeff Bezos's fault and COVID. So the fact that a 12-year-old has figured out that, a bunch of our retail has been centralized online and that one particular person has centralized it even further, to the detriment of the retail industry in his city. I think with Gen Alpha, which is this our kids' generation, is they're gonna be the little hellions. I think when it comes to this stuff, because they'll have literally grown up from it with it from when they were knee high to a grasshopper. Like
They'll either be the Hellions or they'll be the next boomers.
that's
No, I
there's an
mean that.
interesting case to be made. I know
I mean that.
the
Like, I mean,
entitled generation, because we're gonna go out there and suffer and try and fix it for them.
well, we
Yeah.
are. Like, none of us are
Mm,
going to be able to own home. You like, if you don't own a home right now, good luck. You probably aren't going to
mm-hmm.
own a home if you're our age. Like, we're not going to live as long as our parents. That's already a proven fact. Millennials' life expectancy is expected to fall. Um, we don't have access to the same level of healthcare. I've said it before on this podcast. When I was a kid, we had an ER in Blacks Harbor. There ain't no such thing as an ER in Blacks Harbor. There's barely one in St. Stephen.
You're supposed to come to the mainland of like if you live on Grand Manan and you're pregnant, you're supposed to make sure you're basically on the mainland a month before,
Yeah.
because you're not getting there anywhere quick when it comes to
Uh,
giving birth, for
the,
instance.
what's his name? Tommy Green. I can't remember the boy's name. He's got a plane over there. He'll pull you off the island if you have to.
Oh, like that's nice, Tommy.
Um,
That's sustainable.
Mr. Green. I can't remember what his name is. Anyway, somebody from Grand Manan yell at me if you're listening to this podcast and I'm getting it wrong. But yeah, I just think that like there's almost no area. The fact that I can buy this, my cell phone, for a crazy price, and a laptop that my parents could never have dreamed of, that doesn't mean that I'm doing better in my life. So I guess my challenge to people like Andrew Coyne is, I hear what you're saying. Like on a GDP per capita basis, we don't look good. But why are companies not pouring their money into their workers? So, give you an example, Loblaws, right? We all love to pick on Loblaws because they're making bank while the rest of us are barely affording groceries. If that company were to do the responsible thing, what it would do is it would take a bunch of those profits and downstream the stability, make sure that their suppliers, the food producers, the growers, the manufacturers, the drivers of the trucks, you make sure that those gears in the system are well greased. You make sure that they have the better technology, they are stabilized, so that you have long-term sustainability and stability in a time when things look fragile, right? You worry about onshoring more of those jobs. So, hey, we're still importing a crap ton of peas from Florida. I don't know that we are. Please don't quote me on that. But if Fred would know, and he was the person who asked about those super clusters, right?
Yeah.
I think that's what it would look like, right? If a company were doing the responsible thing for society, they would take their profits and turn it into stabilizing and improvement features for capital downstream, so that the driver was able to get places faster, the farmer was able to grow things more reliably, and there was less waste in the distribution center, and there was less waste in the grocery store, and whatever, that system is synergized. But that's not what's happening. What's happening is they are doing what they're supposed to do, which is take the money that they're making in profit and send it to a shareholder.
And we're part of the Cody Institute, which is born out of St. FX, which is born out of a movement around the 1900s, when the fishing industry was getting broken up into pieces, and general fishermen in the area had very little control over the supply chain.
That's right.
And so a priest,
the price of fish was just like crazy.
Oh, crazy. And like it's similar to now. So a priest, this guy Cody, Father Cody, and a few got together to create this basic cooperative for the fishermen in the area, to make it so that they would have investments in all of these areas of the supply chain, so that they weren't hanging out at the bottom of the barrel, if you will, making scraps off of the whole process of fish to table. So, and it has really, and we've talked about this on here before, where Nova Scotia has a much stronger sense of pride and tradition around owning the food and things they produce.
Yes.
And so to me, it's like, it goes back to this supercluster thought, where instead of, being so glad that our number one GDP thing is housing, like, why aren't we looking at how we make blueberries more of a thing, or make maple more of a thing, or fisheries, etc.? Instead, it's like this broken system where one family in particular in our area is making a ton off of the fishing industry, and another is making a ton off the potato industry. And because it's all broken up, there's not a lot of GDP that can be built when there's only 100 families in this country,
no competition,
controlling
right?
everything. Yeah,
there's no competition, especially in
Where's
New
it
Brunswick.
Come from?
Especially in New Brunswick. And this is where things I just find so, it's like we did monopolization so well in the 70s and 80s. I mean, first of all, like my home village, Blacks Harbor, was known as Little Russia. And because it was a company town, it's ironic that it was called Little Russia, because the state wasn't like, my dad will say, when Van Horn was running for the Conservatives back in the day, when Van Horn was running, he's a nice guy, that old Van Horn.
Wasn't there a saying about him that
there was, and I'm just blanking on it right now.
Yeah.
There was a good slogan about Van Horn, cares or something. Anyway, but like he was stopped by the municipal police at the border from entering Blacks Harbor because it was a company town and the company was owned by the Liberals. By the way, folks, if you're listening to this, the Liberals are the same damn party today as they always were. They've always been a company party. They love a big company. They love to see a big company. They love to talk about the impacts of big companies, and they love to support big companies. And that's exactly what happened to Cook Aquaculture, right? We took a fledgling family company that was able to break through and get some wins, and then we pumped it up full of steroids. Now that company is got so much of that industry worldwide now under its control. If that company hits any major sort of administrative disruption, that is like throwing wrenches in 20 gears, right? Because
Well, it's
now
like the
there's
Panama Canal with the ship blocking the
yeah, it's the
Suez.
same sense, right?
Yeah.
When the Panama Canal is a block point, it's a choke point, and if something gets stuck there, it impacts all of us. And that is that is the problem with monopolies. And by the way, capitalism is not supposed to generate monopolies, but it always does. It always leads to monopolies. And if you want to learn more about that, watch Fallout. It's a great series on TV. It's on Amazon. It's on Amazon Prime. Great video game too. But like, I just see this as the same type of leet speak argument here from Andrew Coyne and from conservatives, even intellectual conservatives like Andrew. We're certainly not hearing this type of like serious engagement by Pierre Poilievre, Blaine Higgs.
No, they're not talking about how we they've lost the argument on growth. I actually haven't heard either of those two talk much about the economy in a very long time.
I know. But could it be because they're bankrupt for ideas? Like, I don't know, but like, could it be? But I also think too, like, how can the nation of Canada get 6% GDP growth for the next 100 years? Do you know what will happen if we do that? We will be such a wealthy country, and we will be so consumptive. We'll burn the entire planet down trying to consume enough to hit. Like, this is the thing that Andrew Coyne never seems to address, is if everybody tries to hit the level of economic output and engagement that we have, the world will burn overnight.
How many houses are we supposed to buy?
Right. It's
at this point.
And not just houses buying, like, how much waste can we actually endure where people consume. Some people buy a new TV every 3 years. I got a TV that's from 2011. I've got I'm not one of them. Like, the economy as we built it would collapse if it depended on me to fuel it. And that's a problem, because I live a sustainable life. And most people who are on limited income, like, I don't mean fixed income, but like who make an average wage and our purchasing power declines every year. We can't keep up with that level of consumption, and we shouldn't have to, and we shouldn't want to, because there's only so much lithium, there's only so much phosphorus, there's only, you know what I mean? Like,
we need to live within our ecological means. And I think if we're going to do that, we need to stop measuring things like this.
That's it.
Like, as outcomes of like success, because to my original point, if profits are bigger than they've ever been, if housing prices are better than they've ever been, like more expensive than they've ever been, if everything is making more and more profit, like, why does anyone care about GDP? Like, you're not going to let anyone compete except the same 100 families, people, whatever. So you're not going to let anybody, no startup is going to enter your game without being merged and acquiesced with by another company, one of those likely. That's right. I've seen it over and over. I was part of the startup boom of this province in the 2010s. And there was a huge emphasis on finding that next unicorn. And we had a Radian 6 and we had Q1 Labs. And what good did that do? They got sold to massive companies that ate them up. They didn't create more jobs for here. It created a few millionaires who have done good work. And who, some of them are running for politics now. But they, for the long-term benefit of the province, like, not so much. Like, there's no more jobs. Like, and it's interesting that Higgs and Poilievre are staying away from some of these age-old political beacons of the economy and jobs lately. Fascinating.
It is.
That's why we need to talk to an actual conservative. That's why we need one in the room.
What are you guys doing over there? Like, you used to be the party that was all about competition and, all about sticking it to the liberals for being owned by, corporate elites and representing the elite. You used to be the party that talked about, an economy that works for the average person, and like you're not there anymore, and I don't know why. And I
No, you're
kind of
just
need,
on to this low energy thinking.
yeah, we kind of need you to come back to that, and like, but yeah, like it's with the liberals, like what are they putting in the window? Well, we're just going to spend more money on the stuff that we're not talking about transformation, right? We're not talking about moving a massive percent of housing ownership to the nonprofit housing cooperative sector. We could
They
do
don't
it.
even allow like two people not in a marriage to purchase a property together.
Yeah.
So like,
And that's
like
a
in a
net that,
union.
to me, that's a net to score on for the conservatives. And they just aren't. Like the net is wide open as to why this country's growth is so bad, why our wage growth is so bad, but why our corporate return on investment is so high.
So high and amazing.
Yeah.
It's they don't seem to be celebrating that. Instead, it's all this deflection. Liberals bad, F Trudeau,
Carbon tax.
axe the tax. Like it's just and the don't delete parent stuff. It's just so frustrating. And I like all those things that I remember of the past are just have dissipated completely. So I really would love one of you conservatives to come on and explain to me and to Brent what it is you are looking for.
Yeah.
What do you want to see?
Yeah.
Like I know.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Go ahead. Oh,
No,
just
you.
this whole thing with the shocking budget of the Liberals. It's like to me, it looks like they're just paying for stuff that's needed. Like it doesn't seem that revolutionary to me.
Well, I agree. I will say I do think that this budget that the Liberals passed is revolutionary when it comes to the housing conversation.
The $6 billion.
They are yanking the control mechanisms around the housing system in-house really fast. Now, I have a question. If you want to listen to another podcast, so I'm such a loser. I listen to political podcasts all day. I listen to, if you want to know what I listen to, Brent's Top 5, Curse Politics,
Obviously.
the Hurley Burley, the Man's Bridge podcast, The Bridge, War on the Rocks, and The Daily. I get all of my stuff. Sorry, the light's being weird here. I get all of my stuff from those 5 for the most part. Then I'll also chime into, CBC's At Issue Panel, Front Burner, 538. Anyway, I do all this. But where was I going with that? I've heard on the Bridge that if you want to listen to a good pod tomorrow, same day this podcast is coming out. So let's say today, the Bridge is hosting Minister Sean Fraser, and I have a question that I have submitted. And Peter and I, we go way back, Mr. Mansbridge and I. He issued me my diploma on the stage of Convocation Hall in Sackville when he was the chancellor of Mount Allison. And so I got to get my diploma from Peter, and we said like 5 words to each other. So
Congratulations.
One
He
thing
has had your questions on there, which is cool.
he almost always features my questions when I send it. So I sent Mr. Sean Fraser a question. I think you guys should tune into that, but I do think that the Liberals, the federal Liberals, are demonstrating that they want to yank the control mechanisms around the housing system in-house as fast as they can. And they want that to be the wedge issue between them and the conservatives. The question is will Susan Holt, will she follow suit? Because she's spent a lot of time in the past 6 months trying to convince us all that she's not a Trudeau liberal.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think? Do you think she's going to do it?
I would love her to. I know she's talked about housing a little bit, not to your liking, as we've discussed on here before. But I think that is like housing and healthcare, like Scott Reed said on Hurley, on Curse of Politics, that those need to be her main things. The biggest issues in the room need to be her main bones of contention. We need to show how the Conservatives are losing the narrative and and losing track of what's important to people. So yeah, okay, I will take your argument that the federal budget is revolutionary. I will be interested to see on housing, to see if CMHC and the gang can roll it out in a way that does not overburden bureaucratically everyone involved, because that's all I've
No
seen
chance
so
of that
far.
happening. They will do that. There'll be more money thrown at shit. There'll be more stuff done for sure, and there'll be some new regulation. But CMHC will absolutely overly, there will be at least a dozen new bureaucratic black holes.
Oh, lovely. Well, that's a dang shame. But the blocking of this stuff from the Danielle Smith pigs and Scott Moes of the world, you know, and Danielle Smith's point was, well, there's 350 municipalities in Alberta that weren't, you know, considered.
That's right.
Okay. Like, I feel like that they can be like, that's it's
Well,
not much of an argument.
maybe if Mrs. Smith was doing her job and putting a revolutionary housing policy from the provincial legislature on the table, there wouldn't be a problem. One of the things I called for as a municipal councillor was for us to fixate our approach on certain issues to the federal approach as much as we can. Because at the time I was seeing that the federal government were only partners, and what's happened over the past 3 years is interesting, because now the federal government is saying, actually, hey, provinces, no, we don't want to talk to you. You guys are the problem. You guys are not doing enough. You guys are in the way. So we're now going to try to deal with municipalities. And what do you have? You have premiers like Danielle Smith saying, we won't allow that. If you try to give Calgary money without our permission, we're going to block it. That's pretty amazing.
Bold.
Higgs hasn't said that yet, but we know that
happy.
He is not happy. He's calling the level of spending alarming. And it's like, I'm calling the housing crisis that we have alarming. I'm calling the fact that I got 12 hours in an emergency room alarming. I'm calling the fact that I have less disposable income and less purchasing power than I did 5 years ago alarming. And you haven't put anything on the table to talk about that.
No.
And so, yeah, where does this go? Who's going to benefit from it? But I do think you're right. I think Steve Outhouse, this goes back to your original point at the beginning. He's teaching the PC party how to play American style dummy politics, right? Yeah. So if anybody's listening to this podcast, if you like what the PC party is doing, please come on and explain why. Because I get it from a pragmatic standpoint. It's super reductionist, simple thinking that's catchy and slogany and digestible, but it's dummy politics.
Is it going to change your world, though? Is it going to fix anything for you?
No. And
that's our opinion.
It isn't. I mean, you know, you got to have some sort of unifying theory here about how all this is supposed to fit and what the problem is. But besides saying Justin Trudeau sucks, I mean, Blaine Higgs isn't trying to tell us what the problem is. He's certainly not trying to say things like New Brunswick has too many monopolies.
No.
But
he's not saying anything about grocery prices, you know?
Well, he doesn't worry. What the hell is he worried about grocery prices? He doesn't care.
He probably doesn't ever had one of the last time he's even been in a grocery store was.
Yeah, I'd love to know that one, actually.
Yeah. Because we've been in them, and it's not pretty.
It's not great.
No, but you know, for this week we will we'll keep asking conservatives. Yeah. Come tell us why. Come tell us what's up.
I'm gonna give a wag of my finger this week to Andrea Mason and Jeff Carr, because I've talked to you two about coming on this pod before, but I've never been able to nail you down before. So I'll give you the benefit of the doubt because you've said you were interested, and I think you guys have some important things that you could say. Yeah. And I think you could probably change our minds a little bit, because I don't think we've made up our mind on all this. I just have I think we've both just demonstrated we have a certain like problem and an axe to grind that you don't seem to have an answer for.
Yeah.
But we'd love to hear from you. This is not an ambush podcast. We don't do gotcha stuff. And if we record something you don't like it, this isn't live, so we don't have to publish it. Lots of safety here.
It's a psychologically safe space.
Yeah, there you go.
But yeah, it's been will be continue to be long weeks, and we appreciate y'all hanging out with us for real.
Yeah.
It's been a
Yep.
slice.
It's late. Let's get this one. We'll sign off for now. It's 55 minutes. We realized last week we made a mistake on we had so many of these other segments and I added up the
Yes.
time wrong. So I realized we cut ourselves off at like 49 minutes last week. That was unintentional.
And apologize for the sound issues.
Yes.
That was our bad.
Hopefully we fix the sound this week.
Yes, hopefully we fix the sound. I have some new ear things that hopefully sound a lot better.
Yep.
Because we know how annoying that can be to have funky levels and stuff like that. So we are very grassroots. It is just Brent and I, and really mostly Brent at this point, doing all the editing. So thank you for being here with us. Here's our Patreon. Look at that. Look at
There
that
it is.
fanciness.
Look at that banner right up there. Thank you, Jason King, for the new podcast. I am Earthports for the new mic for this podcast. We are gonna put that. I am gonna replace it here. You have something from Jason too, our good friend. Jason, thank you so much. But also to all of our Patreons. Thank you to our politicos, Mark Brewer, Sean Rouse, Fred LaForge. Thank you to our supporters, Jackson Jones and Luke Robertson. And thank you to those who have just kind of come on and said, hey, I want to keep in touch. Sean Daly and Chris Doyle, any of you, if you want to get in touch with us, here's the email. If you want to support this content in New Brunswick and the New Brunswick political landscape, there's how you do it.
nbpolypod@gmail.com, and then Patreon, patreon.com/nbpolypod. We love you all so much. Thank you for hanging out with us every week, and we will see you next Thursday.
See you next Thursday.